In the Gun, episode 37. It's time to put a bow on this bowl season, college football playoff, college football season, some moving and shaking. Plenty to get to on this episode of ITG. I'm Wes Uhler with the best teammates in the business. Of course, we've got the signal caller, Jed Drenning, and the runaway beer truck, Owen Schmitt. This episode of In the Gun is brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline remains your number one source for all of your sports betting needs this season, everything from NFL and bowl season to esports. You'll always find the latest odds, team matchup information, player news, and game trends at BetOnline. BetOnline features live betting, free contests, and live scores for almost any sport or game imaginable. It's the fastest and easiest way to bet all of your favorite leagues and events. So head to betonline.ag to join and receive your 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit. Make sure to use the promo code BELIEVE when you sign up to receive your rewards. That's BLEAV at BetOnline, where the game starts. And if you're watching on YouTube, I mean, I tell you what, gentlemen, you both got some fresh gear on, some nice hats. We're looking pretty dapper here to start the new year.
Oh, you might win. That's a pretty slick cap you got there, man. I got the trucker cap that exists at your request from the ITG shop at online, and I got this performance polo. I'm not just pushing it. I might sleep in it. You know, it's incredibly comfortable.
Is it that one that like you might not wash it for a couple days and just relish?
Yeah, might not. It's pretty slick. It's incredibly comfortable. So I just got a bunch of new gear in the mail. So anyway, available online, as you know.
That's right. ITGfootball.com. Just click on the shop icon there, and you can be looking as dapper as Jedgar Allan Poe himself. And maybe we'll have some additional stuff coming to the forefront here. We're brainstorming some ideas before we started this episode, so always make sure you're keeping an eye on that merchandise. We'll have some cool things coming your way, gentlemen. It feels like as we head to our headlines here in this opening segment, this time of year discussion, we're always going to have some portal conversation here. We know in this day and age of college football, the portal giveth, the portal taketh away. Well, some good news this week. The portal did some give a thing to your West Virginia Mountaineers on both sides of the football. Wide receiver, we talked a lot about on previous episodes, right? How WVU to the NFL draft and to the transfer portal had lost its top 4 receivers last year in terms of production, how you were hoping for some reinforcements in that department. Well, ask and you shall receive. Devin Carter from North Carolina State flips his commitment from Penn State to West Virginia. He committed to Penn State the day after the Rose Bowl, Jed, January 2nd, I believe that was, or maybe January 3rd when he committed, but then switches his commitment here to WVU, and that feels like a pretty solid, a pretty substantial pickup at a position of need as well.
Yeah, checks all those boxes you just mentioned, Wes, and this is a kid who was pretty coveted, not just by Penn State, but at others. He was a playmaker for North Carolina State, big body, big frame. If you remember when they upset Clemson last year, he was the kid who caught the winning pass in the end zone, the winning score. But position of need, as you mentioned, a guy that can step in right away and hopefully make some things happen, and hopefully assume a leadership role in that room as well, because he's going to provide a veteran presence that room is sorely going to need. So it's a great get for us, no doubt about it.
And the other side here, Big O. Speaking of Penn State, Devin Carter was committed to Penn State. The Mountaineers also got a commitment from a former Penn State Nittany Lion, a defensive lineman. I'm going to do my best here not to butcher his name, but I believe it's pronounced Fat Orma Mulba. Does that sound right, Jed?
Yeah. First thing I thought was the Malva episode of Seinfeld when I saw the name first, but the kid hasn't played a lot of football. He's one of these guys who was a late starter in high school and was very raw when he arrived at Penn State. They knew it was kind of a project and a gamble. Sometimes it worked out, sometimes it didn't. But now he's a Mountaineer on the interior of that defensive line. Of course, we lost Jordan Jefferson.
You needed some help there, too.
Yeah, you're going to plug somebody in there.
Much needed. He's a big boy, too, man. He's rustling around that 300 bills there.
6'3", 300, yeah.
He's a wide body, as we'd say.
Yep.
He is.
He was kind of a space eating one technique. You know what I mean? That's kind of the role that he played up there. And you can never have too many of those types of guys to clear things up for your second level players. Let your backers run free.
Especially with Jordan
a guy like that
Jefferson
could be,
down to Baton Rouge.
there you go. A guy like that could become a very close friend of Lee Koba's, right? So
absolutely.
But this portal thing, we're talking about it, and this window closes on the 18th. It started on December 5th. It's now going to come in waves. That's the new facet to the portal. The next wave will come when the window reopens after spring ball on May 1st for just a couple weeks. But January 18th, this window closes. That doesn't mean you can't sign kids, but right now you're going to have a lot of kids shuffling to get signed somewhere so they can enroll in spring semester for spring ball, right? So that's why the next handful of days are going to be critical from a transition standpoint. But the window will close. So let's see what happens, not only on the incoming part of our roster, but on the outgoing part of our roster in the waning days. What is that, next Wednesday, next Thursday? I need to check the date, but somewhere thereabouts.
Yep. And obviously you guys know we'll be keeping an eye on that. We'll be keeping you posted, updated here on the podcast with everything that happens between now and the window closing next week. But two positions of need where you get some reinforcements, and not just reinforcements, right? Power 5 reinforcements. We've discussed that a little bit. And I think a lot of the fan base had been crying out, all right, it's nice to get these guys in, but it feels like in some of these position groups, we're losing, Power 5 guys, and we're going to the G5 to replace them. Well, here, NC State, Penn State, 2 Power 5 programs. And now I think maybe another interesting, side story to that opening game in Happy Valley Labor Day weekend. Certainly, I think plenty to be excited about there. As it relates to some of this portal stuff. We do a lot of the portal taketh conversation. Well, this week it was the portal given back to WVU a little bit. We love to see that as well, too. Speaking of good news in that regard, one of the Mountaineers that we had been waiting upon to hear a decision, will he stay, will he go? Doug Nestor, of course, one of the mainstays, one of the anchors of this offensive line, West Virginia guy. He announced on Thursday, as today when Jed and I and Owen are recording this, Thursday, January 12th, he posted on his Twitter account that he is coming back for next year. And gentlemen, that's exciting because, it feels like the offensive line really has an opportunity to be a strength of this team when you consider what the Mountaineers have in the backfield and that running back room as well, too. To get a West Virginia guy, to get an experienced guy like Doug Nestor back, that's another one of those. That's a boost. That's some good news this time of year that you're looking for.
Yeah, you got the big uglies. They got to stay together, man. Experience, that's, in my opinion, that's the best run games. Those guys are together for 3 years, 2-3. They come up with each other. They gotta grow together.
That's what TCU just did.
You gotta do that, and hopefully they can figure out a way to get these guys, a Morgantown Campbell Soup commercial or something, and work their NIL. Get them some love. Get them a donut commercial or something. Get them, what I'm saying? Like, let's get creative.
Yep.
Let's get creative. Let's get fun. Let's get, and try to give the incentive out there. Hey, these guys, I really liked what Jed had said. This was episodes back. I would never know which one, but, doing the in-town thing, these guys got to forget about so much the huge dollar amount up front, but like what collectively in town we can really get these guys. Cause there's a lot of business in town, man.
Oh yeah.
A couple thousand here, a couple thousand there. Yeah.
I think it speaks to the key word here. I think with this is continuity. This group has gotten so many meaningful reps side by side. As Owen talked about, it all starts up front with the big uglies, the guys with their hand in the dirt. If you want to effectively run the football, we're all in love with our depth in that running back room, right? But the only way you're going to maximize the talent in that room with what Chad Scott's done with that running back room is if you get production up front. And that all starts with retention of key guys. And Doug Nestor, speaking of the transfer portal, he's another guy who was in the portal way before it was cool to be in the portal. Of course, we got him from Virginia Tech. He transferred in, right? And helped right away. I couldn't be more excited to have him back for another year. And especially when you look at the interior of that offensive line, you got Zach back at center. Okay, so now you got him back at guard. Well, that other guard position, first of all, Jordan White's out. He was a loss in the portal. Okay, Tomas Rimac is back. Okay, so you got some options in there. And when you're building your offensive line from the inside out, Next thing you know, we were pretty happy with the combination. We ended up the season at right tackle. Okay, and the left tackle, you got Wyatt Milam, who's becoming a mainstay and really a guy that you can lean on. So the continuity that group is going to bring to the table. First of all, those were the leaders of this football team last offseason.
Right.
I remember getting on the bus to go back and catch the team flight the morning after the bowl game when we lost to Minnesota out in Arizona, guys. And I was talking to Mike Joseph that morning, and he said, look, it's going to start with Zach Frazier. This is now his team. It's officially his team, and it's officially that offensive line's team. And throughout the course, the entire offseason, those were the leadership roles that offensive line assumed. And now it's exciting to know that they can come back and do the same thing for the duration of another offseason. And Doug Nestor is going to be a critical part of doing that.
Well said. He absolutely is. And yeah, you gotta win in the trenches. We know that. And it's exciting to get those guys back, and hopefully a not only a leadership boost, but certainly a performance boost out there on the field with what they have now on that offensive line and in the running back room, and maybe potentially with a little more mobility at the quarterback position as well too. Some final headlines here as we wrap up this opening segment. There's always some coaching moving and shaking this time of year as well too. Two significant ones as it relates to the Big 12 conference this week. Derek Mason, defensive coordinator for Oklahoma State. He announced that he is taking a sabbatical, a leave of absence. Former head coach at Vanderbilt, correct, Jed?
Yes.
He was at Vandy, then at Oklahoma State last year. He's stepping away from coaching, taking a leave of absence as the Cowboys defensive coordinator. And then just breaking like an hour or so before we started recording this episode, Garrett Riley, of course, younger brother of Lincoln Riley, an offensive coordinator at TCU, Broyles Award winner this year for best coordinator in college football. It sounds like he is on his way to Clemson to join Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers there as their new OC. So from TCU to Clemson. So two pretty substantial pieces of coordinator news across the conference this week.
My eye immediately goes to TCU, and now all of a sudden it becomes interesting to see who does Sonny Dykes tap on the shoulder to bring in, right? Because that was kind of a unique situation. Garrett Riley did in fact take ownership of that offense. He called the plays. He put together the game plans. Of course, it was an offensive brain trust collectively helping do so. But Sonny Dykes is an offensive guy. That's his pedigree. So to coach for an offensive guy and have that type of responsibility thrust upon you, somebody else is going to be asked to do that at TCU. So that's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds. But it's the price of success for TCU. Now, all of a sudden, you lose one of your key guys that was instrumental in this run that you've been on to one of the blue bloods. And the funny thing about it is, guys, I'm not so sure. Clemson's an interesting animal, right?
Yeah.
20 years ago, I'm not so sure they were a slam dunk blue blood. But you combine their history with the last 15 years of success under Dabo, and that makes them a blue blood. So they're in that club of teams that we always talk about that you have to worry about losing people to. So it's going to be interesting to see not only in Fort Worth at TCU how that unfolds, but how things unfold at Clemson. And the Derek Mason piece of it, Derek Mason was handed the unfortunate task of having to replace Jim Knowles at Oklahoma State. And they always say, you don't want to be the guy that replaces the guy.
Yeah.
You want to be the guy that replaces the guy who replaces the guy. So
correct.
Maybe the next D coordinator at Oklahoma State. Now, this is a sabbatical. He stepped down to take some time off after 30 years away from his family in the coaching business. But maybe the next guy will have a little more luck with the pieces that Oklahoma State will have in place, because they've been hit pretty hard by the portal too, and they're trying to be very active in reassembling their roster.
Or maybe he won't have a little more luck, and they can just keep on losing to the Mountaineers here going forward every fall. That wouldn't be so bad either. Some good news here as well too on two fronts. The football world at large keeping an eye on, of course, Damar Hamlin. We talked briefly about that on our last podcast. Peyton Hillis as well too, the former Arkansas guy and Madden cover man who rose to fame with the Cleveland Browns there. Good news on both fronts for both of those guys. Damar Hamlin, he's been discharged from the hospital and will continue his rehabilitation at home. So outstanding news, moves from Cincinnati back to Buffalo, now discharged from the hospital. And then Peyton Hillis, of course, who was on a ventilator after saving his kids from drowning about a week ago, is no longer needing that ventilator to breathe, is now able to breathe on his own. So, gentlemen, always great to hear some good news in that regard. Damar Hamlin, Peyton Hillis both sound like they're on the road to recovery.
Crazy events, man.
Yeah.
That's a superhero right there, big man.
Yeah. Oh,
that's another guy that the way Owen Schmitt played football is the way Peyton Hillis played football.
Correct.
He's in that same group, that same mold, that all-star mold.
Absolutely.
I mean, you know what I mean?
Dude, he was an absolute monster.
Yeah, he sure was.
Absolute monster, dude. I mean, you know, and that was, dude, you look at how the NFL like turns over position-wise, you know what I mean? He was kind of the guy who literally a bunch of guys had to get hurt. He ends up going in and just beast moding it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Straight up, dude. I mean, killing it, getting some chances, and then just kind of he ended up getting that cover. And
he had like, what was it, 2 just great seasons,
dude. Like
he sure did.
Yeah, you know what I mean. But you know, you feed a guy like that, he can, you know, big backs, man. I always believe in big, strong backs, dude.
I bet you do.
Yeah.
You know.
Heck yeah.
And
listen,
and Damar Hamlin, the coolest thing I saw, guys. You remember, or you maybe not. I mean, I'm older than you guys, but it used to be on Tecmo Bowl, okay? Or was it the one before Tecmo Bowl? One of the ones that me and Gibby and Chris George and all us used to play way back in the day.
When you go to the hospital.
Yes. Yeah. And they returned from injury. They had a graphic where the player would be running out of the hospital.
Back on
the field. They did that with Damar Hamlin out of the Buffalo Hospital. I thought that's the coolest thing. How awesome is that? Yeah,
that was on the Bills. That was on the Bills social media, right?
It was, yeah.
For anyone who wants to check that out, that's pretty cool. Before we go to break here, 2010 Peyton Hillis season here, 2010, 1,100 rush yards, 11 touchdowns on the ground, 500 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns.
Man, ball skills. That was an undersold part of his game.
He had 1,600 all-purpose yards and 13 touchdowns in 2010. Whew.
Some of the catches that guy made were ridiculous. I'm telling you, that was a part of his game people didn't talk about.
He scored. He had a 47-yard receiving touchdown and a 48-yard rushing touchdown for such a big guy. That's explosion.
Do you guys remember who he played for in college?
Arkansas, right?
Yeah. Who was in that backfield?
Oh, was that the Darren McFadden and all those guys?
That's right.
Felix Jones, dude.
Woo.
I mean, dude.
That was that upset of LSU.
That's right. Darren McFadden, Felix Jones, Peyton Hillis. I mean, you talk about a backfield.
Woo. Stacked, man.
That was a backfield, son.
Stacked. I love it. Well, speaking of stacked, some might say the Georgia Bulldogs were a stacked football team, and they certainly showed that Monday night in the national championship game against the TCU Horned Frogs. We'll recap that. We'll talk some of the storylines around that when we return on the other side. Wes Uhler, Jed Drenning, Owen Schmitt, you are in the gun.
I'm talking with J.R. Toothman of Toothman Ford. J.R., everybody knows a lot of pro athletes buy from you. What's the secret?
Just like Will Greer, future Hall of Famer Frank Gore, James Washington, and many more pros, these guys have financial advisors that are always looking out for them to save time and money, and that's why they always shop at Toothman Ford.
And what if you're like us regular folks that don't have people giving us advice?
You don't need a financial advisor. Toothman Ford will save you time and money no matter who you are. Plus, we'll buy your car even if you don't buy from us. Visit ToothmanFord.com and get a quick, instant cash offer.
That sounds like a score to me.
That's right. And as always, we'll take anything in trade from chicken wings to Super Bowl rings.
Toothman Ford's got a lot of fans. Here's another one, Dallas Cowboys QB Will Greer.
This is Will Greer, former West Virginia and current NFL quarterback. And cars really do cost less in Grafton at Toothman Ford.
That's a fact, Will. Thanks. You can shop online anytime at ToothmanFord.com.
Let's go, Mountaineer fans. You're tuned in to In the Gun with Wes, the Runaway Beer Truck, and the Signal Caller.
Game day got you on the go? We get it. GoMart is here to keep you going all season long with stores throughout our home state. We're a proud West Virginia-owned company, and our friendly staff is committed to serving our communities. From fuel to freshly brewed coffee and snacks, a stop at GoMart to cover your game day needs is always a touchdown. Plus, GoMart Rewards members earn points with each purchase to redeem for discounts on gas and free items. So stop by, start saving, and stay on the go with GoMart.
Back in the gun here. This is episode 37 as we put a bow on the college football bowl season playoff. A little bit of everything here. Of course, the crown jewel of that is the national championship game. And it was on Monday night, and it was a little lopsided. 65-7, the final score there, as Georgia beats down the TCU Horned Frogs. And Jed, one that just, man, I think everyone who's watched football, covered football, played football like you two gentlemen did, you've been parts of games like this. Little surprising to get it on that stage. I think we all knew that TCU was the underdog and Georgia was the heavy favorite, which is just insane when you consider the talent they lost from last year to what they were able to keep doing this year. But 65-7, I think that was a little more lopsided than the three of us thought it would go.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely, man. I was like, oh, boy.
Oh, and I was looking at Georgia's drive chart was like touchdown, field goal, touchdown, 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 punt, touchdown, 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 end of game. I mean,
hey,
one possession didn't end in points.
Here's what I'm going to say. Tell me if I'm true. TCU looks scared.
Yeah, they look passive.
Hey,
Owen, did you hear Kirby Smart's?
That was not the same team that beat Michigan, in my opinion.
No, I don't. I agree. That's not the team Landry was on here talking about last week. No,
that's what I'm saying. I was like, dude, he was like fired up. I'm like, these dudes are about to go down there, and this is going to be a legit dogfight.
Did you hear Kirby Smart's pregame speech?
Oh God, dude! I was like,
first of all, I find it. I can't tell you how frustrated I am that got out.
Yeah, it's
that's ridiculous that's getting out.
Yeah.
That should never get out of that locker room. But Owen, were you surprised by one single syllable of that? No, absolutely not. I mean, I bet you and I could have guessed almost word for word what he was going to say. I mean, because you and I have heard it, right?
Yeah, dude, I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I was in that locker room. I wish I had one kickoff left, son. It's a ring. It's a ring. College, that can't get lost ever, or we'll lose the game. That can never.
You guys, here's what I'm going to search Twitter. It's out there.
It's out there.
And again, it frustrates me as, look, that's a sacred place that should never leave that law. I don't know how it got out. That really upsets me. But the fact that it did gives you some insight into the types of things that often do take place in those settings. Here's what that sounded like to me, guys. It sounded like to me it was a coach who absolutely, positively knew beyond any doubt his football team was better than the other football team. Now, here are some numbers that we didn't discuss going into this. We all know it was David versus Goliath. We all know it was the giant against, the non-giant. All right. Let's talk 4 and 5 stars. These comparisons were out last week. We didn't bring it up, but Sporting News did a study, a breakdown. They used 247 Sports rankings from recruiting rankings. Okay. 4 and 5 stars combined. We'll break it down. 5 stars. Georgia on their roster and TCU on their roster. Georgia had 15. TCU had 1. Linebacker Marcel Brooks, who played in 4 games all year. 4 stars. TCU had 16. Georgia had 53. So 4 and 5 stars combined. Georgia had 68. TCU had 17. Kirby Smart was in that locker room telling them, look, if we lose this game based on our talent against theirs, that's purely on me. And I'm not going to let that happen because it should never happen based on talent. Here's what I would say, and we'll get into some of how the game unfolded itself. But I'll say this, guys, walking away from that, I honestly feel if you would take Georgia's front 7 and they switched uniforms before the game and they got TCU's, front 6, I guess, out of the odd stack. I think it's the other way around. I think TCU wins the game. I think they win the game with Georgia's front 7. I think all of a sudden Max Duggan looks a whole lot more like Stetson Bennett.
I mean, Max Duggan was under siege from
that's
the
right.
First snap.
All of a sudden, the TCU run game with DeMarcado looks a whole lot more like McIntosh than McIntosh did. All of a sudden, Quentin Johnston looks a whole lot more like McConkey. Everything else falls into place. That TCU front 7 was so disruptive, but I want to tip my cap to the game planning done on the offensive side by Georgia, or the Georgia front seven looked so disruptive. But Todd Monken offensively, what he came out doing, he recognized, look, TCU is going to try and sell its soul to stop our run game. Why wouldn't they? So not only did he use play action to great effect, and really, you saw him, Owen, how many times did he mess with the flow of those backers and make them pay for it off the run fakes, right? But even the first touchdown of the game, okay, which was a run play, Georgia, they arced the offensive tackle, okay? And what they did was they ran a zone read. But instead of blocking it the way that you would normally block it and read the overhang, with the quarterback Stetson Bennett reading the overhang, if he pinches, you take it and run. If he steps up, you give. What they did was they arched the tackle and left the interior defensive tackle run free. So now all of a sudden, the edge player is blocked by the Georgia tackle. So on the interior, the defensive tackle pinched to respect the inside of the zone concept. Yeah. So Stetson Bennett pulls it, and he takes off up the seam with a 300-plus offensive tackle blocking the edge player and creating a perfect alley for him to waltz straight to the end zone. In other words, that was a design that was specifically put in place for the odd stack that TCU was going to try and stop their run game with. So not only was we creative in the pass game, but Owen, I saw things like that in the run game right out of the chutes.
Yeah. Their run game was, I mean, Stetson is he is so fast on the camera. I mean, how fast does he run? He's got to run a legit.
I'm glad you asked that. Something was said during the broadcast that I wasn't aware of. Here's my frame of reference. Garrett Green, who runs like a scalded dog. I mean, Garrett Green is blistering fast, right? Garrett Green was timed at 21 miles per hour on the GPS in practice. He has receiver speed, okay? Stetson Bennett was timed at 20 miles an hour. I had no idea Stetson Bennett was that fast.
That quick.
Dude, he was fast, man. I'm telling you.
You're daggone right he is.
He was.
Golly, son. Like, this dude can run.
Moving. He was moving.
But yeah, like you were talking about the run game scheme, it kind of reminded me what we did a little bit in Oklahoma, where I actually lined up in the wing position, would end up blocking back, and we'd kind of run zone like that with me as that blocker. But what would end up happening is there would be so much flow because they weren't used to me line up in that tight end kind of deal.
Yep.
Back. I mean, the game planning, dude, so crucial. Found a way to really take advantage of it. And I mean, it obviously showed. I mean, they destroyed.
They did. It was coaching. It was personnel. Yeah. It was substitutions. The way they decided their moments to pull their.
They looked a little timid to me, just a little timid. The way we came off that podcast last week, I said, dude, this is going to be one heck of a game.
Yeah. You know what I think too, Owen? I mean, it was absolutely everything they couldn't have out of the chute, right? Yeah. TCU gets the ball first. They go 3 and out. They hand it back to Georgia, and Georgia goes right down the field with ease and scores. Yeah.
You know, I mean, it wasn't just 3 and out, guys. It was 2 missed opportunities on that 3 and out. Max Duggan had 2 opportunities to make big plays in the throw game, and didn't on either one of them. He wasn't accurate with either one of those throws. And the next thing you know, you can't lose opportunities against a team like. In other words, they should have had the ball near midfield twice on that opening possession, and he overshot both of them. Things he hasn't done a lot all year, and he did. And the next thing you know, you're punting, you're down 10-0. It was a blown coverage that really got him back in at 10-7. But that was frustrating to see how it unfolded right out of the early parts of the game.
Dude, I want to go back really quick to that speech on Kirby too. I'm sorry, I just had a quick note. I don't know if that's his speech like all the time, and I'm sure it's not, you know what I mean? It might be, but I doubt, I doubt
it. Yeah.
It is.
You're right.
But that is like he grew up with that. That's what you give for the final speech of the year, man.
Yeah.
Save that stuff. Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry. There might, some people might look down on it because there was a lot of F-bombs dropped in that sucker. But
there's 18 to 26-year-old men in there. You know what I'm saying? That's
as heartfelt as a coach gets when you're playing for the national championship. I just want everybody to know that's what it is. Unfortunately, like you were saying, Jed, that it did sneak out because that should be a special moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is what it is. Hey, go football, man. That's how I want to see more of that, honestly. But they don't have to show it on, that's what's so unfortunate about the social media stuff.
Yeah, that sucks because now all of a sudden this could be a step towards now I have to leave my phone outside the locker room.
Right.
It's just
Right.
Why would you do that? That should not be heard by fans. I'm sorry. That's just, Owen, you and I have been front and center,
I'm just saying,
almost identical speeches.
You know what I mean?
You know what I'm saying? I mean, like, I remember when I was coaching with Rich, and we were in Montana, and we were playing a game against, I mentioned, guys, that the one year against Montana, we played against Petrino's dad. Well, the next year, we played against a guy that had coached in NFL Europe. And they had a great program at Western Montana. And we went out to face them, and it was, 4 below zero at Vigilante Stadium in Dillon, Montana. And I'll never forget the speech that Rich gave in the locker room. And it was about how his seniors weren't going to have their careers end on a frozen damn field in Montana. And it was a lot like what Kirby was saying. Now, it didn't work that time because we lost that game. But most of those speeches Rich gave, and you saw it too, they did work. They did work. Those coaches like Kirby Smart, you're right. I promise you, when they played the team from the MAC early in the year, that wasn't his speech, okay? He picks his moments. A guy like Kirby Smart knows what buttons to hit, and more importantly, when to hit those buttons. And Owen, you just capped it all. He was saving that one for the end. I mean, that was a
Jed, you mean he didn't bring that much fire when they were playing Kent State?
That's right. That's exactly right. So it was just so impressive from a motivational side, from a coaching side, from a game planning side. I mean, even when you look at what they did defensively, okay, they tried to have answers for what they knew they were going to see with TCU and TCU's zone read game. Max Duggan was so lethal on that thing all year. We've seen him tuck it and literally go 80 yards against Big 12 defenses, right? I mean, he's an athletic kid. There's a reason he was a 4-star that was recruited by Notre Dame. He's a dangerous weapon in the run game. But when he went on that pool, did you see Samal Munden as the edge player, Owen? When he read that, he crashed and pivoted right now, and he was just so much more. And Max Duggan is an incredibly athletic quarterback, but he's not as athletic as Munden. And Munden redirected and made that play for a TFL. And even when I look at Jalen Carter is a guy early in the game, maybe it was in the first series of the game, they threw a perimeter screen. And here's this 300-pound NFL defensive tackle. It's going to be a top 5 pick. Guess who made the tackle on the sidelines on the perimeter screen? Jalen Carter did. You know why he was able to do that? There's 2 reasons. 1, he's gifted with the athleticism and burst to do it. But 2, he can't do that for 60 or 70 snaps a game. They snap count him just like a pitcher's pitch count. He averages 33 defensive snaps a game. In this game, right on cue, he played 32 snaps. And because they do that with him, and because they enjoy such depth with all those other 4 and 5 stars behind him, they can say, Jalen, when you're in, it's full bore, it's 100%, it's literally sideline to sideline, because we're not going to ask too much of you. As soon as you get winded, we'll tap you out, boom, somebody else is in. Go full bore, make those types of plays and be that disruptive. So from a defensive game planning standpoint, that's what impressed me. You had answers to some of the creativity of the TCU run game. Now, I was frustrated, and I voiced it to you guys off air, that Garrett Riley, you went into this game knowing your feature back, Kendre Miller, was out. So you're already down to your number 2. Now, he's a talented number 2 in DeMarcado, no doubt about it. So they got options behind him. He ran for 150 career high against Michigan. But when your feature back is out and Quentin Johnston is the best player arguably on the field, you can't target him only 3 times. His one catch was on a perimeter screen for 3 yards. You have to find more ways. Yes, he's going against NFL defensive backs. But guess what? He's an NFL receiver. A lot of these guys that you were asking to go against NFL defenders are going to be accountants in 5 years for TCU. He's not. He's going to be playing on Sundays in 5 years. You needed to find a way to feed him the football more than 3 times, even if it reached a point where you were nearly forcing it. I was kind of frustrated by that. Not that it would have made much of a difference, but give yourself a puncher's chance, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Agree.
I completely agree.
Man, you hate to get wiped off the floor like that, but sometimes you gotta take licks, man.
You know what, Owen? I'm glad you said that, Owen, because let's go there. Because of course, as you guys know and everybody knows, that the next day was in the following, the fallout this week was so predictable of, see, this is why you don't put Big 12 teams in the playoff. Well, see, this is why you should have just had Alabama in there. Like, did we miss TCU beating Michigan? Did we miss TCU, the team that couldn't even win the Big 12, take down the Big 10 champions? Did we miss all of that? Like, there was this, I don't know if you guys saw it. There's this video that was, it was everywhere. ESPN, Barstool, everything in between was, it was this Mississippi State fan going on a rant in his basement. This guy who's a little bit older gentleman, maybe in his 50s or 60s, and is like, college football playoff committee, you should be embarrassed. We all got to sit home and we got to watch this at TCU. Are you kidding me? And I'm like, bro, did you miss the part where they beat Michigan to get there? And it's just, that whole idea, like a Michigan or a Mississippi State fan going on a rant about how the college football playoff committee has ruined college football is just, it's the perfect encapsulation of all of this. Like, bro, knock it off. All right. Yeah, you play in the SEC, but I mean, you play in the SEC the way the Pittsburgh Pirates play Major League Baseball. All right. I mean, they're not playing baseball like the Yankees and the Astros and the Phillies and the Dodgers are. All right. It's a little bit different there. And it's so predictable, and it drives me nuts because you knew that this was, even if the final score would have been 44-19. Oh yeah, that was the score that Clemson beat Alabama in the national championship three years ago.
Yeah,
people would have still been reacting like this. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this is why we don't let Big 12 teams in, as if they didn't have to beat Michigan to get there. And hey, newsflash, this thing's expanding. You're only going to get more of these type of games. You're going to get more upsets and more great games as well too. But you're going to get more of these games as well at the same time.
That's how it works, man. So you got to play good the entire year. Okay. And once you get in that playoff, well, let me rephrase. You got to get it. The best part is now you got to get in. Got to get into that playoff. Once you're in, anything is possible.
Yeah, so including getting your doors blown out by a Georgia team that's going to have 10 guys drafted.
How much things have changed. The last time I saw a team so physically dismantle another team, much like we saw in Georgia and TCU, the last time I saw this happen in a national championship game, ironically, it was an SEC team on the business end of it. And I'm
talking Notre Dame, Alabama.
No. I'm saying on the business end of it, on the losing end of the blowout and the dismantling. If you go all the way back to the mid-90s, when the Tommy Frazier Nebraska team went up against the Fun and Gun Spurrier Florida team, that's kind of what I felt like I was watching. That 62-24 Nebraska win over Florida, that Danny Werfel team, which was an incredibly talented Florida team. But they just got out-physicaled, outmanned, overmatched. It very much resembled to me what I watched in TCU and Georgia. Now, if you want to make an argument that TCU shouldn't be there, then walk me through the linear thinking you're using to get to the end of that argument. Because are you suggesting Alabama should be there? Okay, well, look, they play the regular season for a reason. All right. I'm not going to say Alabama doesn't have more NFL talent. I'm not going to say any of that. Of course they do. Who plays when the chips are down? Who's more productive as a team in the games that matter to get you there? Okay. Yeah. Alabama shouldn't mismanage the clock and lose to Tennessee. Alabama shouldn't let LSU score the 2-point conversion. They should get a stop. You have Bryce Young, for crying out loud. You really have an excuse to find yourself in position to nearly lose to Texas on the road at DKR with Bryce Young? He's the only thing that bailed you out at the end of that game. You really have an excuse to almost lose at home, even though Bryce Young was hurt, with your roster versus what at that time was a limping Texas A&M when Jimbo came to town? They were lucky to survive that thing. So you're trying to put together and string together a resume. Look, you just want to name the 4 teams in August? Go ahead and name the Heisman Trophy winner in August. That's what people want to do. Games for a reason. Now, a lot of this stuff, ironically, okay, I think will work itself out as we only have one more year of this, okay, and then the problem will start to resolve. Because once you expand to a 12-team playoff, a handful of things are going to happen, okay, over the arc of time. And among those things, the regular season's still going to have integrity. The regular season's still going to matter, okay? But now it's going to matter for different reasons, okay? Now, those games that in November heretofore might have been meaningless if you knew you were out of a 14 playoff, well, now you're still trying to battle, and not only to get into a 14 play or 12-team playoff, but you want a home field advantage in a 12-team playoff. So what will happen is the 4 highest-ranked conference champions get a bye. So it starts there. You want to battle to the bitter end all the way through every game and every snap in November to be one of those 4 teams. And if you can't do that, then you want to be 5 or 6 or 7 or 8. So you're hosting in the first round. So every snap in November is going to matter more than it ever has. But also what's critical, and I've heard Rick Neuheisel talk about this ad nauseum. If Alabama or Ohio State or Clemson or Georgia, look, collectively, they're still going to be the blue bloods. Collectively, they're still going to be the front runners in the big picture of this. But if over the course of time, right now, if you're a top ranked kid, if you're a blue chipper coming out of the high school ranks, and you want to play for the big prizes on the biggest stage, if you want to go to the playoffs, you're hedging your bets, all right? You're looking at it, you're saying, my best option, it's only 5 or 6 teams. So what's happened is going from a 2-team to a 4-team, we thought it would be beneficial, but all it's done is created something we've never before seen in the history of the sport, and that is super teams. You can take any dynasty in the history of the sport, whether it was Osborne's Nebraska teams, the Bears Alabama teams, none of them were these super teams. And that's what's happened because of the funnel guiding all these kids to the same 5 or 6 teams because they want to go to the playoffs. Well, now when you expand to 12 teams, we've talked about this on this podcast before. Bryce Young, starting quarterback at Alabama, California kid. C.J. Stroud, starting quarterback at Ohio State, California kid. We saw Brock Bowers, the stud tight end from Georgia. He's a Napa, California kid. So you might see some of these kids decide to stay a little closer to home when all of a sudden 20 different teams are in the mix to make the playoffs instead of 5 or 6, which means those 5 or 6 will start losing just a couple kids to balance things out a little bit. And you know what? If we go to a 12-team playoff, and I've also heard the other side of this suggest, well, what are you going to do in the Final Four SEC from a 12-team playoff? You know what? I think people might be a lot closer to being okay with that. If, in fact, you do that, and we don't do it the Olympic figure skating style of the East German judge, gives you the highest rating because you look the prettiest in the skirt, okay? Football games should decide this. More football, not more voting and judging. Yes. So if you play a 12-team playoff, and you happen to land with a Final Four that's all SEC, at least they battled their way tournament style to get to that Final Four, and it wasn't voted on. The biggest shortcoming to me, and I'll get off my soapbox and pass it back to you guys, in college football versus the NFL is the voting dimension of it. I hate the voting dimension of it because the human element of, what you decided in the preseason is going to, that's what makes this TCU story so incredible. They started unranked, projected 7th in the Big 12, and they went from, now it's fine for an SEC team to start unranked, right, and climb their way because they're going to climb pretty quickly, but to start in another conference unranked and climb your way all the way into the playoff after losing your conference championship game, it's one of the most incredible stories, not just in modern college football history, but I'd say in college football history. But the 12 team is going to work toward addressing a lot of that. The Blue Bloods will still be the Blue Bloods. I'm not going to say they're not, but I think this will help mend at least some of those issues.
I'm with you. I think so. Yeah, it's going to be, I think, I think you're right, Jed. If you're if you're one of those 5-star kids from California and, I'm going to go to Alabama, I'm going to go to Ohio State, I'm going to go to Georgia. Now, maybe you're more likely, hey, I can go to USC and I can play quicker and I can still get in this national. I could go to Oregon. I could go to Utah. I can play right away as opposed to having to sit behind all these, first round draft picks.
It doesn't take a ton because it's those 5 or 6 teams against the field. You know what I'm saying? There's 125 other teams now that can try and fight for a playoff spot. Like Tulane would have been in the playoffs if it was a 12-team playoff.
Right.
So there's 125 other teams that are trying to steal one kid off the roster of those 5 or 6. And that adds up pretty quickly. And so we've already seen it. We talked about it in the past on this podcast. The SEC hasn't been impacted from a starting lineup standpoint. And even with the incredible depth that we saw Georgia enjoy during this run, the depth, for instance, that we saw Alabama struggle through and almost lose to Texas A&M at the quarterback spot almost cost them that game, whereas the depth they enjoyed a short few years ago with Tua won them a national championship game. We're already seeing a little less depth with these 5 or 6 teams. So go to a 12 team and let the 125 other teams chisel away just a little bit at those 5 or 6 rosters. It'd be interesting over the course of time, not in a year or two, but over the course of time to see where that goes. I just think it'll be interesting.
I think you're right. And I think that's something the sport needs right now because aside from those, select few SEC fans who are at programs like Mississippi State and Texas A&M, and they're latching onto the coattails of Georgia and Alabama and LSU. I think all college football fans realize that the product right now is not as good as it could be. And there's a lot of things that have gone into that, certainly. But I think one of the ones that we can start to get moving in the right direction is that expansion of the college football playoff, which, as Jed mentioned, not next year, but the year after, right around the corner here. And that is obviously something that we'll be keeping you updated on and talking about here on ITG.
Owen, we hoped we were going to get the West Virginia Sugar Bowl against Georgia, but we got the West Virginia Sugar Bowl against Florida. That's what we got.
Oh no, Mike Vanderjack taunting the Gators sideline before the game. Yeah, let's not talk about 93. All right. I mean, I was only 2 years old, but I still those scars still cut deep. We got to get to break here, and we come back on the other side. We'll close this thing down. We'll tell you what we got in store for you the rest of the way. You are in the gun. For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
For more West Virginia Mountaineer football content, be sure to follow us on Twitter @InTheGunPodcast.
Final segment here in the gun as we close down this episode, as we put a bow on the college football playoff, the college football season. And you, Jed, rightfully so, wanted to make sure that we mentioned this for our longtime college football fans, a name certainly that everybody will remember. Charles White, a Heisman Trophy winner from USC, passing away recently. And I know rightfully so, you wanted to just talk about him for a second and make sure we offer our condolences.
Way too young. Yeah, 64 years old. And, he leaves behind a heck of a legacy. When you look at that long string of tailbacks that USC had from the 60s into the 70s, from Mike Garrett to OJ, back when OJ was known for football, and Ricky Bell and Anthony Davis, Marcus Allen. Marcus Allen was actually the fullback for Charles White. Think about that, which is crazy before moving to tailback himself. But, it says a lot. Owen, you can appreciate this as much as anybody. When you listen to what teammates say about you, and when you listen to Marcus Allen, he's like, look, I'd see people just knock him into another dimension, and Charles White would just pop right back up and keep on giving it. When you listen to Ronnie Lott, Ronnie Lott would say the only guy I've ever seen go as hard for as long would be Jerry Rice. So there's no doubt in my mind that a guy like Charles White, again, hate to see him go at such a premature age. This is a guy who had a couple, rushing national titles, won the Heisman, had an NFL rushing championship with the Rams in '87. But with the toughness and physicality that he brings to bear, brought to bear, he's the kind of guy that'll go to heaven and give him a little bit of hell. I think that's what he's going to do.
I love that. That's well said. And I'm glad that you made sure we got that in there. Charles White, 62 years old, way too young, but leaves behind certainly a heck of a legacy on the game of football collegiately and in the National Football League. Gentlemen, before we go, as we wrap this up, New Year's resolutions. Big O, what you got?
I'm getting back in shape. The beer truck's getting back to 1-pack, son.
Oh, yeah. I like that one.
Listen, for the last 3 months, I've been hitting the gym hard with my boss.
I love it.
6 a.m. workouts, Planet Fitness.
I love it. You got any eligibility left?
We started doing some walking. I think I got a COVID year.
You got a COVID year. There we go. Come on. Team needs you. Team needs you. That's a good one. That's a good one. And I tell you what, I mean, we might really have to, we talk about all this merchandise for ITG. We might have to get one of those calendars made with Owen, Jed. I don't know.
Or in his locker, like the Seahawks did.
We might have to.
What you Jed Growlin Poe, other than writing more poetry, what's your New Year's resolution for 2020?
I got two, let's say professionally and two personally. Professionally, I'd say, look, this is all going toward this portal. I want to do what I can, if there's such a thing as I really want to try and master it. There's different sources out there, whether it's on 3.com, 247. There's a lot of different sources that rate it differently. I want to try and spend the off season sorting through that and make as much sense of it as I can, because it's not going away. It's going to be a mainstay.
Getting your PhD in the portal, basically.
I'm going to try. Yeah. So, but anyway, I want to at least have some understanding or better appreciation for the variance across the different range of evaluations by these different outlets. So hopefully by next season, because whether I'm on the radio, whether I'm on the podcast, it's going to be the part of the conversation.
Absolutely.
So you got to know, you got to appreciate it. And the other thing would be, I really, on the YouTube side of the podcast, I want to have a better understanding of how the algorithms work, how we can build this thing up. Because I think we got a heck of a jump start. So I really want to get towards a more in-depth version of that. And I think we're heading towards some YouTube shorts to help promote it, to get our subscriptions up to where we want them. And then on the personal front, my wife and I, we're both busy. She works a couple jobs. I work multiple jobs. I'm always on the fly. I'm always driving. I'm covering different parts of 3 states. And, she's been through enough in life, not just, in the last several years, but specifically recently, that we're like, hey, let's try and figure out a way to get our schedules to converge. Maybe at least every week or two, can we have lunch? And it's going to be moving a lot of pieces, but so far we've done it once. Now we got to get to number 2. And then, I got 2 kids. I got a freshman in college. He just turned 19, and I got a 9-year-old, 3rd grader. I coach his basketball team. I want to try and continue to learn more from both my kids. Because if you sit back and listen, it's in a weird way you do, and I've always kept I'm old school in the sense that, with my Pfizer job and how I coordinate against football and all that, I got regular calendars that I just handwrite everything in. I'm not one of these digital calendar guys. And one of the reasons I do that is I like to keep handwritten notes of things my kids say or do, and I have them dating back for 15 years. I can pull out my calendars across my office here and look back and say, the first time Dylan said this when I picked him up from school in the 6th grade. So I like doing that. Sure. And you can learn a lot of cool stuff from your kids. I mean, they'll say some amazing things. So I want to make more of a conscious effort to try and not just chronicle it and write it down, but actually learn from both of them.
I love it. That's a good one. That's a real good one.
Yeah.
I'll close this down here. I always like to do one serious one and one goofy one, right? So what do you want first, serious or goofy?
We got to start with serious because we got to finish on goofy.
There we go. That's a good call. Serious one for me is just to be more patient. Like, guys, I'll be honest with you. I'm not a patient person. Whether I'm behind Owen's over there peeing his pants, whether I'm behind the steering wheel of a car, whether I'm trying to get my daughter dressed in the morning, whether I'm standing behind some of you people in line at Milan Puskar Stadium trying to take a piss during halftime, right? Patience is just not my strong suit. All right. On the day when God was handing out patience, I wasn't around. All right. I skipped class, or I skipped Bible study that day when God was divvying out the patience. I've got a 15-month-old daughter. I've got another one on the way. Obviously, patience is a big part of parenting. It would just be better for my overall health. And I don't need to be yelling at somebody who's going 5 miles an hour slower in the left lane than I want them to be. Patience. I need to become a more patient person.
Wes, you need to start lifting some heavy Schmitt, brother.
Yeah, that'll help me.
You need to get it out, my man.
You need the drilling pen up there, man.
Lift some heavy weights, man. I'm telling you, it does wonders for the.
I think that would mellow me out. I need a little woosah in my life.
I'm gonna say this, Wes. I'm not gonna let my wife hear this episode, or at least the end of it, because if she hears you, she's gonna want me to switch mine.
So that's my serious one. Owen's right. I got to find a better way to channel that annoyance, that peeve of just anybody who dares add 30 seconds to my day is getting it.
Hey, man, I chop a lot of wood, and here's what I'm gonna say. I don't know where you live in the city or whatever. Get you a damn tire and get you a sledgehammer and go beat that thing.
I love it.
20 minutes a day, dude.
That's a good one.
I'm telling you right now, you'll feel like $1 million. You'll get your heart rate up.
I love
and
it.
Those prop, I'm telling you, they just.
I'm gonna text you for some ideas. A little woosah. I need and I live in the suburbs, so I got a backyard and some woods, so I got space. Punching bag would be a good
Greg
one.
Schiano anger management course there, chopping.
I'm telling you right now, if you get the sledgehammer, when the neighbors see what you're doing, all right, they're never gonna mess with you, man. Okay,
that's a good point too. I'll be out there shirtless, just swinging that thing away.
He's gonna come out there like he's leading the team on the field at Milan Puskar Stadium with a sledge.
You let it all out, man. I'm telling you, it's such good therapy, dude.
And you know what? That's good by you, Owen, because before my daughter was born, I used to play hockey once a week, but that's just so hard now because the games we didn't play until it'd be 2 a.m. by the time I get home, and I can't do that. I can't do the 3-4 hours of sleep every night thing like Jed does.
I'll say this though, still remember to get that time in, dude. If you can still play, definitely play as much as you can till it's over, because I'm not saying take your time up with that, but I'm saying give yourself a little bit, because man, sports, I don't know. It's
therapeutic.
Man, very therapeutic.
Man, it's hard. I wish more people felt like that. You know what I mean? Just getting out there and getting out and
just getting that serotonin and that dopamine firing off, right? Yeah.
You need it. You need it.
No, absolutely. So patience and
get your
I'm getting a sledgehammer and I'm getting his skates back on regularly, and we're gonna work out that patience issue. And then
just take some Paxil or Lexapro. Get you on some 20 milligrams of Lexapro.
I just get 20 milligrams of some gummies, maybe, or something like that. My goofy
man, whatever, dude.
My goofy New Year's resolution. I know Owen will appreciate this. Just to drink more Guinness. Quite simple. I over the holiday season I had a few Guinness, whatever the plural is. And I always, every time I have a Guinness, I'm like, man, this is a dang good beer right here. Why don't I drink this more often? So had a handful of Guinness over the holiday season. So that's my goofy one. I got when I'm looking for a beer to turn to, I got lovely day for a Guinness a little more often.
Now you need a nail horn.
Boom.
Wes, let me say one thing about that. My whole life, I've heard people this time of year make resolutions. I've probably heard several hundred, maybe even thousands from everybody throughout the course of time. You just gave me the one that I think has the highest percentage of chance of success. All right there.
You know what?
I think that is the most likely resolution I've ever heard in my life.
As soon as we stop recording this, I'm going to get right to that resolution. All right, I'll get on it tonight. How about that? A little instant action.
I'd be like saying, I want to eat more this year.
Drink more Guinness.
The honest resolutions, yeah.
Listen, we're going to improve our patience. We're going to get that blood pressure down. We're going to drink some Guinness in the process as well, too.
And sedate yourself to improve your patience.
That's right, exactly. I won't be screaming at the WVU basketball team as they miss 37 layups every single night while I'm on my 5th Guinness. That's the plan right there. Absolutely. Gentlemen, this was a lot of fun. This was a good episode. I enjoyed this. Happy New Year to you guys, to all of our listeners. And we will be continuing this podcast throughout the off season. We've got a list of funny topics we want to do. We'll keep talking transfer portal and some spring ball. And like we've teased, I got the combine, 5-6 weeks from now that I'll be at, and we'll have some cool content there. So make sure you're subscribing, locking in with us, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. When we get to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, we're going to do some giveaways. So hey, help the cause here. Be an ear. That's your New Year. That's our New Year's resolution for our listeners. How about that? Be an ear, tell an ear about your favorite WVU football podcast. ITGfootball.com for all your needs. Click the shop icon there if you want to look fresh like Jed. If you want to get one of those performance polos to sleep in at night as well too. For Jed Drenning and Owen Schmitt, I'm Wes Uhler. Thanks for listening. As always, we'll talk to you guys next week. You've been in the gun.